Hi guys, I'm Meg. I'm one of the trainers on staff over at the Humane Society of Western Montana. Thank you for joining us for yet another behavior spotlight. Me and my dog Volta here. If you've been tuning in, you may recognize this topic. Tiff covered it back in December, but I'm going to do a little bit of a different spin on it. I think we could all use a refresher on coming when called. It's such an important skill. It's important for safety, and as the weather begins warming up, it's really important that our dogs are responsive to us when we need them to be. So we're going to do a couple exercises today. I want to talk about cleaning up name recognition. So you may think your dog is really responsive to their name, and if they are, that's awesome. But if you find yourself having to say their name and many times in order to get a response, we have an exercise for that. If you are joining along with your dog, feel free to grab a handful of their daily kibble ration. You may also choose to have a leash handy, and you can practice along with me and my dog. The first thing that I want to talk about, and you're probably tired of hearing both Tiff and I use this word, is management. And management is so important in all respects of dog training, but particularly with recall. The reason being is if you say your dog's recall cue or say your dog's name and they don't respond or they don't come when they're called, unfortunately, our dogs are learning to blow us off. And we certainly want to keep our recall word really, really potent. When your dog hears the word come or here or whatever your word is, you want it to be the absolute best part of their day. You want, when they hear that word, to spring into action and come running. So we're going to talk about ways to supercharge that. Some of these things, like I said, will sound probably familiar from Tiff's live stream, but again, we're going to do a few other different exercises together. If at any point you have questions on recall, name recognition, or coming when called during this live stream, feel free to drop those in the comment section. I'll be checking it intermittently, and hopefully I can address that for you. If you have other questions, behaviorally speaking, not pertaining to recall, we have resources for that, and I'll provide those at the end. So management. You might be wondering, how can I manage my dog when it comes to being off leash? And if my dog's leash is off and they don't respond, how can I make that better? So I want to introduce to you guys the idea of a long line. Maybe you've used one before with your pup, maybe you haven't, and it's not the same thing as a retractable leash, which can actually encourage our dogs to move away from us because of the pressure. But a long line is essentially just a super long fixed length leash. This is a biothane line, so it doesn't pick up mud or dirt. You can find them at sporting goods stores in some cases, or you can order them online. They're pretty common for dog sports, and you can find a biothane long line for fairly cheap. So using a long line for your dog, and I do recommend attaching it to a harness as opposed to a collar, because of course, if you're not managing this length, and I believe this is 30 feet well, and your dog takes off to go greet a dog or greet a deer and they hit the end of the line, they could unfortunately harm their neck. So this essentially prevents your dog from making mistakes. Even if your dog doesn't respond to their name or doesn't respond to their recall cue, at the very least, you can prevent them from completely blowing you off and having that really enriching, lovely experience of chasing a deer through the woods for 15 minutes or running up to greet that dog you didn't want them to greet. So this just prevents them from having that additional reinforcement of whatever it is that they wanted to get to in the first place, like the squirrel or the deer or the other dog. The second is, when you are working on rebuilding recall with your dog, to not call them away from things that they really, really love, like the dog park, right? We're all guilty of it. It's time to leave the dog park. Our dog is wrestling with another dog. We call them to us. Now they're inadvertently being punished for coming to us, and that can weaken the strength of our recall. The day will come where you certainly can call your dog to leave the dog park. But if your dog's recall is iffy, we don't necessarily want to call them away from things they love. Likewise, we don't want to call them to us to do things that they hate, like maybe your dog hates baths or nail trimming. And we certainly, even if our dogs are playing keep away and we're getting really frustrated, we don't want to scold our dogs for finally coming to us, even if we're frustrated, because we're decreasing the likelihood our dogs will come when called in the future, maybe when there isn't a long line attached. So it's really, really important that we think about, again, making that word the best part of our dog's day. The second, I guess, tip that I have for you guys is right now to not use your recall cue if you know your dog isn't going to come. And likewise, setting your dog up for success. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But if your dog pretty reliably is ignoring your recall cue to run off after a squirrel in the backyard, or they're really distracted and you know they're not going to come, chances are pretty good, simply walk up to your dog, clip a leash on, and guide them away or bring them back inside. So we really, again, we want to preserve the sacredness of this word because it's just so important. And the day may come where we need to call our dog off of a deer because they're running into traffic to chase after it. Awesome. So my dog is playing around with the bone, so I apologize for the clattering. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. We're good. All right. So we're going to talk about name recognition. And sometimes our dogs are really responsive to their names, but sometimes in more distracting situations, they're not so great. But maybe you have a puppy at home and maybe your name recognition isn't really solid yet. So I'm going to talk about ways, if you have a little dog or a dog that's new to you, ways to make their name even more powerful. So some pointers here. I want to make sure you can see me. Great. So I have my pup Bolsa here. And let's say my dog is distracted. I have my dog out on a walk. In most cases, I recommend practicing this first indoors if your dog is new to you or it's a puppy. The leash can prevent them from getting super distracted or running farther away than the 6 feet of the leash. And if you have a teeny tiny puppy or a dog that's new to you, we first want to supercharge that name when they're already directly in front of us. So for instance, my dog's name is Volta. All I'm going to do is say that name and pop a treat in their mouth. And I'm going to do this maybe 5 or 6 times. Even if your dog knows their name pretty well, this can still be a great way to refresh them and help them associate their name with positive things. Volta. Volta. And notice how I'm saying her name in different tones of voice, because sometimes we're happy like, oh, Volta, right? But sometimes maybe we're frustrated with our dogs or we want their attention in a situation where maybe we're a little more stressed. Volta. 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 Awesome. So I'm just supercharging her name. All I'm doing is saying her name and popping a treat in her mouth. We're making those really positive, strong associations. Now, again, this is pretty basic, right? But let's say my dog is distracted and I'm going to just toss a treat out of reach for my dog to distract her. I'm going to say my dog's name. The moment that she looks at me, I'm going to use a marker. Maybe you've used a marker before, which is just a word that says, great, that's what I'm looking for, like good or yes. So I'm going to toss this treat out of reach, say my dog's name. The moment she looks at me, yes, and feed a treat. So I'm tossing the treat, Volta, yes. So I'm saying my dog's name the moment she, Volta, yes. So did you notice it took her maybe a second there to think about it? Maybe your dog, if there's something distracting, Volta, yes, is going to take a second or two. And as people, we're very vocal creatures. I see the biggest mistake is repeating our dog's name over and over and over again. So if your dog is really distracted and they're having a hard time responding, give them 10 to 15 seconds before you repeat their name. Otherwise, your dog or your puppy is learning to only respond to their name on the 5th or the 6th time. Or they might learn, oh, my name is Volta, 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 instead of just Volta. So I'm going to distract her again. And again, if you're at home with your dog or puppy, Volta. Yes. So it took her a second there, right? She's really insistent upon getting that treat. It's just out of her reach off camera. And it took her a moment. Let's see if she gets distracted again. Volta. Yes. Right? The moment she looks at me, I'm using my marker, which in this case is yes, yours could be good, and then feeding a treat. She knows she's onto the game. Volta. Yes. Great. Awesome. So again, just brushing up on our dog's name recognition. And name recognition is so important because we really need to be able to gain our dog's attention in distracting environments before we even call them to us. Because if our dog doesn't give us the time of day because they're sniffing bushes, they don't even look at us, how could we possibly expect them to come back to us or to come away from that other dog or to come away from whatever, the deer, the person they're excited to greet? So you can practice this at home the same way I did. You could practice in your backyard. So having your dog on a 6-foot leash or in your front yard. I mean, it doesn't have to be fenced. Saying your dog's name the moment they look at you, feeding them a treat. And I recommend doing this just a few times during your walks at random. Sometimes our dogs are really immersed in a smell. Saying your dog's name, feeding them a treat, and just allowing them to go back to that smell. So really, we're just supercharging their name, which is pivotal to recall. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, the comment section, but otherwise I'm going to move on. So you might be wondering, okay, my dog already knows their name, right? How can I make that word come or hear or whatever it is more powerful? So I want you to think about right now saying your recall cue when you already know your dog is going to come. So maybe your dog has learned to blow you off, again, using management tools like a long line or a leash, but we're going to say our dog's name first. If they look at us, that's great, but I want them to begin moving towards you before you say your recall cue. So saying the word come. And in a lot of cases, I would say your dog should be maybe even 5 or 6 feet away from you only. So they're just learning, okay, coming to my person, that's what that word means. Otherwise, if you say your dog's name when they're 30 feet away and they only glance at you, you can't be sure really that they're going to come. And right now we want to set them up for success. We want them to be successful as close to 100% of the time as possible. Otherwise, right, they're learning to blow you off. So this is hard to demonstrate within the confines of my living room, but all I'm going to do is step maybe a little bit away from my dog. I'm going to say my dog's name. As she's already moving towards me, I'm going to say my recall cue, which in this case could be come, and then I'm going to feed her 3 treats, right? In this case, I'm using my dog's kibble. If you are working outside, I recommend using something higher value, like jerky treats or chicken, cheese, hot dogs, something that your dog really loves. So I'm going to move just a little bit away from my dog, but still on screen so you can see me. I'm going to say my dog's name. When she begins moving towards me, I'm going to say my recall cue and then feed her 3 treats. Volta, come. And then I'm going to feed her 3 treats. So notice how I didn't say, Volta, come, right? When she had only just stood up, I wanted her to actively be in motion towards me before I said that word. So I'm going to show you again. I'm going to step back a little bit. Volta, come. And then I'm going to feed her 3 treats in a row. Awesome. And again, if you're at home with your dog and you just want to practice this, feel free to give it a shot. I'm going to put her back here. Oh. Volta, come. right? So she was more than halfway before I said my recall cue, not just when she had begun turning, not when she stood up, but when she was already en route, because I want her to succeed as much as possible. Again, I would recommend practicing this, in your living room, in your yard, places that are familiar in a lower distraction environment. We always want to increase the difficulty of this kind of exercise gradually. If your dog is really new to this, you may still want to hold their leash. When you're outside and they're a little bit distracted, you can practice this exercise. And you don't want to practice recall kind of like this live stream over and over and over and over again. You want this to be pretty novel and exciting for your dog. So only practice this just a few times a day, and that's much more sustainable. So even dog trainers, we don't like to train for hours on end. We do it for a living, we come home, we only want to do training exercises here and there. So just integrating it into your walks, into your daily routine. I'm going to practice this just a few more times with Volta. Again, if you have questions, drop them in the comment section. Yeah. Volta, come. And then I'm feeding her. I'm off screen, but 3 treats, one after the next. Awesome. Do one more. If she follows me, right, that's okay. Go get it. Volta, come. She made it to me, though I was off screen, and then I'm feeding her 3 treats, one after the next. So again, setting her up for success. If you're out on a hike, maybe your dog is already like, right, their recall's good enough to be out in the community. And you want to practice this with your dog, say your recall cue when they're already headed towards you. So if you're out with your dog in a low distraction environment and they're running from 200 yards across a field full speed, and you think, oh, you know what, they're really going to come all the way to me, throw your recall cue in, and when they arrive, treat them heavily. So the 3 treats, high value, one after the next. So I have a great question for Madeline. Hi, Madeline. Complicated question. If you have more than one dog, Ellie has great recall when she's alone, but when she's with her brothers, she follows them. I don't ask her to do anything but that. Does following other dogs take away from her training? So I need to parse that out a little bit. Ellie has great recall when she's alone, but when she's with her brothers, she follows them. Okay, so I guess the question is, right, when this dog is with her dog siblings, she's blowing off the recall cue when she's with the other dogs, which is common, right? Dogs have that pack mentality. They love staying with the members of their crew, especially when they're out sniffing. So I would recommend starting an exercise like this in a controlled environment. So Madeline, if you have a fenced yard, or if you have a fenced yard at home and you have multiple dogs and you're finding that your dogs aren't responding as well when they're as a group, practice it when there's no distractions at first. So she can begin getting used to being called away from her brothers in a low stakes environment. So they're in their backyard, they're all sniffing around. I would have Ellie on a long line or a fixed length leash, whatever she's comfortable with or what you think is necessary, and just begin practicing recall in that controlled way. That way you can kind of get a better sense of, okay, is she going to be more responsive as we begin adding in distractions? If you're practicing this in your backyard and she's reliably coming to you each and every time, start doing it with an increasing level of distractions, right? We don't want to go from 0 to 60, so anticipating her to respond within the house to now anticipating to respond when she's 200 yards away on trail with her brothers. So gradually adding in distance and adding in distraction, but kind of going back to basics and working on this in a way where it's really, really controlled. Them. Oh, so she clarified. She comes well with them, but she comes to me when I call them. I guess my question is, if she comes when I call one of them, is that bad? No, that's awesome, right? Some people have a kind of a group recall cue. So I'm getting a puppy soon. I've already been thinking about this, and I know many multi-dog households have this, but just a phrase that has been supercharged for all of them. And incidentally, maybe Ellie has had that positive experience of coming back with her brothers. I think that if she using their good recall as a conduit to bringing her along, you can certainly still reward and reinforce that behavior, making it more likely to occur in the future. So I hope that clarifies your question a little bit. Awesome. So we did name recognition. Then adding our recall cue as our dogs are moving towards us. I want to talk about an option that you can practice some rapid recall with your dog. This is going to be a little bit difficult to illustrate within the confines of my living room, but I'm going to try my best to do it. So the exercise is pretty much the same as what we just did, but instead I'm setting my dog up to get distracted and then encouraging them to come back to me. So instead of trying to manufacture a situation where my dog is distracted, maybe I just want to practice this a little bit in my house. So I've got my pup Volta. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a couple treats, and I'm going to toss a treat away from my dog across the floor. I'm going to say my dog's name just as she's eating or about to finish eating the treat, depending on how fast your dog is at guzzling down treats. My dog, who is a lab, is very quick. As she's moving towards me, I'm going to say my recall cue and then feed her 3 treats. So I'm going to toss this treat off camera, so you may not be able to see her the full distance back, but I'm tossing a treat away. Volta, come. And notice you couldn't see her entire route back, but you could see where I said my recall cue, which was just when she was 5 to 6 feet away from me. Not when she had just turned her head away from the treat, but when she was almost all the way here. So I knew she was going to succeed, and I know that we were building her recall. So again, I'm going to toss a treat out of reach, say her name. As she moves towards me, my recall cue, and then 3 treats. Volta, come. 3 treats. And I'm tossing one away. Volta, come. 3 treats. Then I'm tossing one away. Volta, come. Feeding 3 treats. So you can kind of see why we call this rapid recall, right? We make it easy to set up doing multiple repetitions, and it kind of becomes this fun game for your dog. The good news is it's also kind of tiring. So if you have a yard space or if you have a long hallway in your house, this is a great place to practice this exercise. All right. I'm going to do a few more rounds of rapid recall with my dog just because the mechanics are a little bit tricky and thinking about when you're saying things and when you're delivering those treats. So if you want to practice along with your dog at home, feel free. I hope you have a handful of their kibble. So I'm going to toss a treat away. Get it. She's too good. Free. Volta, come. Eating her 3 treats. Tossing a treat away. Volta, come. So notice how long the space between saying my dog's name and saying that recall cue was. All right, I'm going to toss a treat away. Volta, come. Awesome. And one more, tossing a treat away. Volta, come. Again, waiting just until I know for sure, or at least I'm 99% sure, right, my dog is going to come all the way back to me. Awesome. All right, so I want to wrap up by talking about some very useful tips. So body language matters. A lot of times people struggle, especially with dogs that have learned to play keep away when they're called back to their owner. And in a lot of cases, we're not really thinking about our body or how our body is perceived by our dogs. So especially if you have a fearful dog, a dog that's maybe a little bit more nervous or has previously been scolded for coming when called, facing our dogs head on to call them to us, unless your dog has been reinforced for this, is really confrontational. And some dogs are not likely to be as responsive as we're looming over them and staring directly at them, because in dog body language, that kind of means, whoa, stop. So yes, while I may stand robotically, right, and toss a treat away and leer over my dog, Volta, come, right? That's awesome if your dog is doing that. But if you're looking for more enthusiastic recall, you can think about creating a party on your end. So maybe there's nothing super exciting happening where you are, except for maybe your treats. But if you're calling your dog away from other dogs or something they're really excited about, they're not going to be very motivated to come to you if you're standing very rigidly and you just say, Volta, come. Because then you're so much less exciting than what's happening out there for your dog. So I want you to think about turning your body away from your dog. And in some cases, you could even try jogging. You can change the pitch of your voice and kind of be excited. I think the more enthusiastic you are about your dog coming, the more enthusiastic they're going to be about joining you, because they think, wow, you're excited about something. There must be something good happening, or maybe we're going to play together. So hopefully she'll illustrate this for me. But again, I'm going to just show you the difference between my standing sternly like this and then my moving away and being enthusiastic. So I'm going to toss a treat away. Volta, come. Right, great. I'll do another mechanical. Volta, come. She came, right, that's great, but maybe I want her to move faster. So I'm going to toss a treat way down. She's so quick at this. Volta, come. And I don't know if you could tell the difference, right? But instead, my voice was excited. I was moving away from my dog. Instead of a casual trot back to me, she actually loped to get back on the way. So I'm going to show you again, tossing a treat away. Volta, come. Right, running full speed to move away with me. Dogs may think, okay, we're going to play chase. Again, something really exciting is happening on your end. So your tone of voice and your body language really matters. You don't have to become overly reliant on this. I know we may be concerned about looking silly, but if for now it's encouraging your dog to come when they're called, it's really worth it just to strengthen their recall. So something to consider. Tiff talked about this in her recall live stream, but using high value jackpots. And I think that if you're using recall pretty regularly, at least doing a jackpot 1 in every 5 times that you're saying your dog's name and calling them to you. This encourages your dog to gamble. So a jackpot is anything of really, really high value to your dog. So that could be, again, boiled chicken, hot dog, cheese, table scraps, single packet cream cheese containers. In this case, I have a small container of canned cat food, which is really fishy and stinky, and she never gets this. So it's extremely exciting and novel to her, and it helps strengthen that return to handler call. So to implement a jackpot, you do it the exact same way, do all of these exercises the exact same way you have been, but when your dog comes to you, pull out your jackpot and provide it. So if you're hiking and you want to practice supercharging your dog's recall, you can clean out an old pill bottle and stuff, meat scraps from last night's dinner in there. Again, these are really, really portable. I like to take these hiking with me. They make squeeze tube versions of this, but a great way to supercharge that recall. So I'm going to do this with my dog. Hopefully I don't get cat food on my carpet. I'm not going to open it until she's back to me, because I don't want her to think the only reason why she should come to me is because I have open canned cat food. So I want her to not necessarily be on me. I want her to have the reward or realize the reward is there after she's responded to my recall cue. So I'm going to toss a treat away. When my dog moves back towards me, again, I'm going to say my recall cue, and when she arrives, I'm going to open up and deliver this jackpot. And we'll see how much canned cat food that I get on my carpet. Full top, come. Good girl. What a good job. Yay. And she can just lick that out. So a jackpot, I mean, it should be maybe 10 to 15 seconds, right? It should be super exciting and the best part of your dog's day. You want them to know that when they hear this word, sometimes maybe they get 3 treats, but sometimes they hit the mother lode, right? They get that jackpot. All right. A last couple of pointers is that recall and off-leash skills are not necessarily synonymous. So a lot of people become reliant on using recall in order to keep their dog with them when they're off-leash hiking. Well, I'm not going to delve too deep into that today. I know down the line we're probably going to offer some outdoor courses on off-leash skills. But if you find that your dog is consistently wandering off and you're having to call them to you 10 or 15 times or 20 times during your outings, you should focus instead on rewarding your dog for staying within proximity. And again, using a long line. Recall is kind of reserved for those moments where maybe your dog is distracted and you need to bring them back to you, but it is not the cornerstone of off-leash skills. A lot of times we become really reliant on recall for that reason. Last pointer is to make a list of distractions and think about what is the easiest to call your dog away from and what is then ultimately the most difficult, so that you as an owner can think about how can I gradually increase the difficulty of recall over time so that my dog is still succeeding. So for my dog, it's probably pretty easy, of course, for me to call her across the living room. So that would be number one, right? If I can't successfully call my dog to me from across the house or across the living room, how could I expect her then to come when called when we're out on a trail and she sees a deer? So practicing there first. Now, if your dog masters that, go on to level 2. And maybe that's coming when called when you're standing in the backyard. So how many people, struggle with getting their dog's attention and having them come to you just when they're in their own yard space? Again, we want to master that first before we up the next difficulty. So maybe the next one is calling away from people they want to greet, right? And depending on how people motivated your dog is, you need to be more motivating than those people. And then maybe it could be other dogs, and then it might be deer. So very, very gradually working up the difficulty for your dog. A lot of times we have this anticipation where, again, if our dog knows recall at the house, of course, we should just be able to hit the trail and our dogs can come to us. But again, we want them to succeed as much as possible because recall is so important. And every time our dogs actively ignore that cue, so come, they're learning to blow us off and realizing it's not very relevant. It's not important. I'm just going to check and see if we have any last minute questions. And we don't. So I'm going to bring up our end card here. And this is our contact information. So if you have questions pertaining to recall, pertaining to any behavior or training question at all, please contact us. We're available. There are trainers available just about 7 days a week. You can email us at behavior@myhswm.org. Wednesdays, we're doing behavior spotlights. I know we're kind of coming to the end of that soon, so stay tuned for what our future offerings are. Thursdays are puppy class with Tiff and her puppy, now kind of adolescent dog Paya. I believe tomorrow they're talking a little bit more about socialization with other dogs, which is an extremely important topic, especially considering the current climate. If you've missed any of our sessions, you're interested in learning about other behavior spotlight skills like nipping and biting, I think we did one on crate training, managing reactivity, things like that. Most of these sessions are now available through our YouTube channel. The link is at the bottom there. And some of them, if they haven't yet been uploaded, they are available through the video section of our Facebook page. Last note is we are a privately funded nonprofit organization, so any cent that you can donate goes towards the continuation of these kinds of programs and the care of our shelter pets. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. It's supposed to be a lovely couple of days, so get out there and practice recall with your dogs. Have a great night.